I bet you've been hearing on the news about this National Association of Realtors lawsuit and all of the changes that have come from it, right? Well, there's a lot of things that the news is not telling you, and the devil is in the details with this one. And I want to talk today about particularly how it is affecting home sellers in this market. So check this out.
All things real estate and all things real estate.
Okay, so this first part of the video, we're going to talk about 4 important concepts that have come from the rule changes. First, newsflash, commissions are negotiable. Did everybody know that? Apparently these sellers in this lawsuit did not know that. So now one of the new rules is that we as agents and brokers have to make super sure that when we are talking to sellers, we are very clear that commissions are not a set amount or percentage. Let's back up for a minute and talk about commissions and how they're split up and shared between buyer broker and selling broker, listing broker. When you sell a house, a typical, again, not set, but typical percentage is 6%. Are you paying the listing agent / broker the full 6%? No, you're not. Typically that is split evenly between the listing agent and the buyer agent broker. Can that percentage be less than 6? Yes. We even see 2.5% or 2% on either side sometimes in real estate transactions. Does the seller have to pay the buyer agent and broker? No. But it's in the best interest of the seller to do so. We are going to talk about that in a minute. So we're going to table that so we don't jump too much off track here. Bottom line, first basic concept from the new rules is that real estate commissions are negotiable, and you need to know that as a seller. Okay, so the second basic concept that came from the new rules, the buyer agent commission itself. Let's get into a discussion about that. Many people in general, including a lot of home sellers, may not know that sellers have historically paid a buyer agent commission. If you ask the average person out there about that typical 6% that we just talked about, they'll say, well, that's the commission cost I paid to sell my house. They don't think about that being shared between the listing agent and the buyer agent. But it has been that way for a long time, that shared commission of the 6% or around there. Well, guess what? As part of the new rules, it's my job as your listing agent when I come sell your house to make sure you know darn well that you do not have to pay that buyer agent commission. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? As a seller, if you don't have to pay that buyer agent commission, you could save half of that commission, or you could like a 3% on the sale of your house. Wow! It's a lot of money, right? Okay, but don't get too excited yet because, like I said, the devil is in the details on this one. Let's go back in our history book and look at the reasoning behind sellers paying a buyer agent / broker. After all, you're paying the other side to negotiate against you, right? How does that even make sense for a seller to do that? Why would they do that? Well, the reason why it was done that way is that without the buyer agent / broker bringing the buyer to make an offer, to contract on your house, to get it to close, that sale doesn't happen and you don't sell your house. In fact, the National Association of Realtors reported that in 2023, 89% of buyers purchased their home through a real estate agent or broker. That is the vast majority of buyers, by far. So it is important to consider that if you are selling your house, it is very likely that a potential buyer is going to be represented by an agent / broker. The question then becomes, who pays them? So, okay, the basic concept from this number 2 from the new rules is you as a seller do not have to pay a buyer agent or broker commission. So that's the basic concept. That brings me to the third important concept of the new rules. If the seller doesn't pay the buyer agent or broker, who pays? So let me just say real quickly, these new rules aren't really new for sellers. There are actually a lot of things behind the scenes for real estate agents and brokers that we have to do now that we didn't necessarily have to do so much before. But from the public point of view, from how these new rules affect sellers, not much has changed. Why do I say that? Because like I said at the beginning of this video, in the first change, real estate commissions have always been negotiable. Sellers never had to pay a listing agent or broker 3%. They never had to pay a buyer agent or broker 3%. Was that 6% total a typical amount? Yes, like I said previously. But it was never set in stone. Okay, so back to the third concept from the new rules I want to talk about. You as a seller do not have to pay a buyer agent or broker. But if you don't, then who does? Someone has to pay the buyer agent for the work that they do, right? It's been the seller in the past, but now if a seller chooses not to, that amount would then fall on the buyer. I've heard many people say, yep, that's how it should be. Buyers should pay for their own agent, for their own representation. And honestly, I can see the argument for that for sure. Each side pays its own representative, and that's it. But I'm here to tell you that while it might sound good in practice, it's not really super realistic. So let's get into that because it's a pretty important discussion to have. So in my mind, the biggest change for sellers based on these new rules that came out from the NAR lawsuit is that even if you decide to offer a buyer agent commission, you actually don't have to disclose that, and you don't have to disclose that amount. So you don't have to put out there in the public realm that you're offering a buyer agent commission, number one. And number two, you don't have to put out the percentage that you're offering. Say you decide, okay, well, I'm going to offer 3%, and you tell your listing agent that. Well, your listing agent's going to ask you, do you want to disclose that to the buyers or not? Or do you want to make that negotiable as part of the offer when the offer comes into you? Now, there's all kinds of reasons why I don't love this new rule. One of the main reasons is because I don't love the idea of negotiating a buyer agent commission. Like if I'm representing a buyer, I do not like the idea of trying to negotiate my commission and what I'm actually going to make as far as income alongside my buyer's offer. I think that could be a potential conflict of interest. I have a fiduciary responsibility for putting my buyer first, right? So if I can't get them that house and the seller only wants to pay me 1%, and then I have to tell my buyer, well, I can't take 1%. Like I can't feed and clothe my family for that amount of money. Then that becomes a thing between my buyer and myself. And it just, I don't like the idea of negotiating it as part of the offer, but that's a whole probably other video that I need to do. That's too much in the weeds for this one. But the important thing for you to know as a seller, the fourth important thing that has come from these new rules is that you as a seller, even if you do decide to, that you are probably going to offer a buyer agent commission, you don't have to disclose that idea. You also don't have to disclose that amount anymore. That amount it doesn't have to be public if you don't want it to be. And you just have to relay that to your listing agent. Now what I want to do is I want to give you some real life examples and scenarios of what's already happening in the industry as we're dealing with these new rules. Okay, here we go. Number one, buyers paying their own agent broker. Like I said, I get this argument, but it's not really happening, at least not at this point. Time will tell if this changes, but let me tell you why it's not changed yet. Because everything is market driven. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, here's a scenario for you to explain what that means. Let's say you're selling your home. You've decided not to offer to pay a buyer agent commission, which is your right as a seller. Just want to make sure you know that. Your neighbor down the street is also selling his house, but he is offering a buyer agent commission. Are you going to be competitive with your neighbor's house? Essentially now your house costs a buyer 3% more to buy. Why is that? Because someone has to pay the buyer agent, right? That someone, in your case, as a seller choosing not to pay a buyer agent, is the buyer themselves. So that's why I'm saying this is market driven. In the real estate market today, as of right now, buyers are simply not absorbing this cost. So at this point, what I'm seeing in the market is that sellers are still offering a buyer agent commission. And buyers are typically not paying their own agents. That may change as the market adjusts, but it hasn't yet as of the taping of this video, September 2024. Okay, so let me give you another example, scenario, case study about how these rules might affect a seller. Again, this involves the buyer agent commission and who pays it, but this time it's not only who pays it, it's along with how much do they get paid. Scenario number 2. Let's say you're a seller. You've chosen to wait until you get an offer on your house before you decide exactly what you want to offer the buyer agent / broker. So you direct your listing agent to not tell the buyer agent what you're offering. You just want them to bring an offer and put in whatever percentage they ideally want in their offer. So remember, with this new change, you are negotiating not only the offer on the house itself, but also the buyer agent commission percentage or amount too as part of that offer. Here's what just happened with one of my agents in my brokerage. Her name is Ashley, and this is what she just recently experienced. She had a buyer who wanted to put an offer on a home. As we do when we make offers on homes representing buyers, we've always done this. We contact the listing agent, we discuss various terms, what do your sellers need, what's going on with the refrigerator, that kind of stuff. So with the new rules in place, she had to ask the listing agent if the seller was offering any buyer agent commission, because that's not public anymore. At that time, the listing agent told Ashley to put the offer together along with the commission percentage that she and her buyer had agreed on, which she did. She put it in there at 3%. That's what she'd agreed on with her buyer. And so they put the offer in. What comes back is a counter offer from the seller with the house price at one certain amount at a 3% commission, and then a house price at a different amount with a 1% commission. That is the challenge that we have in this new market, is we are putting our commissions and what we're going to make alongside our buyers' offers. And I have a real struggle with that, honestly. So what ended up happening is they ended up working it out. She worked it out with her buyer. It ended up being a better deal for him to actually have the lower percentage commission in there. He was going to make up the difference with Ashley's commission at closing. So that back and forth is always an interesting time because buyers are emotional. They see signs, right? It has to feel right for them and that kind of thing. Well, they had this big back and forth negotiation on the house price and on the commission as part of the house price and all that kind of stuff. Well, then they have their inspections, they start negotiating inspection stuff, and then they have another big back and forth on inspection stuff. And the buyer decided to terminate. So you have a seller who is negotiating all this stuff, going back and forth, made the commission part of the negotiation, which just makes it another hurdle that the buyer has to jump. And the buyer actually, we don't know this for sure, but we think that with all that negotiation that went on with that house and the back and forth, he just got too much. It was just too much back and forth, and he pulled out. So that would be what I would worry about for a seller negotiating a buyer agent commission as part of the offer. It's just buying a house is already a lot for a buyer, right? It's already like, got to have the down payment, got to have the closing costs, got to have this, got to have that. And then they've got to worry about buyer agent commission along with it, which if it's out front and they know it already, that's already going to be part of their cost, okay, that's fine. And there may come a time that is the case. But in this world right now, buyers just aren't used to having to even worry about paying their agent. It's just never been a thing. So now that it is a thing, I do think that we may see more sales affected by having to negotiate that at the time of the offer as well, because the offer itself is already nerve-wracking for buyers. So anyway, that's the second scenario that I wanted to share with you that we've already been through in this last month since these changes have gotten in place. So that, in a nutshell, is basically what has changed for sellers based on these new rules. And again, I say it hasn't changed all that much. The biggest change probably for sellers is that the percentage for a buyer agent isn't isn't sort of public. It isn't known to real estate agents. It can be known if you ask the question and you allow your listing agent to disclose that. But it's just not published anywhere, like on our multiple listing service and that kind of thing anymore. So that's one of probably the biggest changes. There are a lot of things behind the scenes that real estate agents have to do now with different, paperwork, and it's always fun to add paperwork to our lives. But these changes have affected the way that we do business, and it'll be an interesting new world. And if you are thinking about selling your house and would like to chat about these changes, I am always ready and available to do that. And I hope that this was informative to you. If you have questions, let me know. And I will see you next week on another edition of All Things Real Estate. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.